We are joined now by White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Sarah, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Let's talk about the State of the Union address. We'll pick it up right where Kristen left off. The president is coming into his first State of the Union with a rip-roaring economy, low unemployment, the wind at his back in terms of the economy, and yet his own personal approval ratings are at record lows. Does he look at this as an opportunity to kind of build that back up, to try to unite the country? What will he say?
Absolutely. Look, the president's going to talk about a number of things tonight. Certainly the economy will be front and center. We've had a historic year, record-breaking moments throughout the year, in large part due to the president's leadership on deregulation and a huge capstone at the end of the year with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which we have seen have immediate impact with several hundred companies stepping forward and giving pay raises, bonuses because of that tax cut and that tax reform package. You're going to see a big focus on national security. This has been something the president has talked about for a long time. For the first time in years, we are seeing massive impacts on ISIS. They are on the run, and major progress has been made on that front. The president has made that a big part of his administration. You're going to see a focus on that. Immigration. The president last week laid out the framework that is a bipartisan deal that brings both Republicans and Democrats to the table and gives everybody something of what they wanted most.
So, Sarah,
this is the first attempt we've seen to really deliver on this topic and on this issue, and a real chance to make some big reform, and we're excited to see that take place.
So lots to talk about at the State of the Union, and lots to talk about behind the scenes as well. As you well know, the Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, abruptly resigned yesterday, earlier than expected. The president has made no secret of the fact that he does not care for Andrew McCabe. You said that he wasn't part of the decision process. Was he happy to see Andrew McCabe go?
Look, I haven't asked him specifically about that, but he certainly has voiced some frustrations with some of the actions by the deputy director. But the bigger issue is the president has full and complete confidence in FBI Director Wray, and he has left these decisions to him. And I would refer you to them for specifics. Right now, and certainly top of mind for this president, isn't about Deputy Director McCabe, but it's about the State of the Union. It's about bringing the country together, setting a very optimistic vision tonight, and I think you're going to see a lot of the president's heart in this speech. I think you're going to see a lot of the patriotism of this country, and I think it's going to be a really incredible and powerful night, not just for the president, but for the entire country.
And back to the Russia investigation for just a moment, because let's go big picture, and here's what I don't quite understand. The president has said there's no collusion, there's nothing wrong here, there's nothing to see here, and yet one by one he's gone after every single one of the Justice Department officials who is connected to this, whether it's his own attorney general, whether it's the former director of the FBI, James Comey, who he fired, whether it's Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the FBI, even saying he would fire Director Mueller. If there's nothing to see here and he's innocent, and why does he go after all of the Justice Department officials connected to the Russia investigation? Doesn't it at a minimum look bad?
Look, the president hasn't gone after the special counsel. We've been fully cooperative. We volunteered thousands upon thousands of documents. Over 20 different individuals have done interviews. We've been as transparent as possible throughout this process.
But he has gone after every single person at the top of this investigation, including the attorney general he appointed. So I guess the question is, if there's nothing to see here and he wants to cooperate, why does he continually go after people who are connected to the investigation and just trying to do the investigation? I mean, doesn't that make it look like he has something to hide? Some of these individuals,
frankly, if some of these individuals were just trying to do the investigation, they would have done it and it would have been wrapped up. Time and time again, the only thing that has come out of these, and every single time after interviews, after reviewing records, the only thing that they come back to is that, no, we haven't found anything yet. Frankly, I think the people that are frustrated most isn't the president, it's the American people. They're sick and tired of being inundated with Russia fever. They're ready for the media and the rest of the country to be able to solely focus on how to move us forward. That's what the president's been trying to do.
Sarah, but on that issue,
what you're going to see him do tonight.
Would you agree, though, that had the president not fired Director Comey, there wouldn't be a special counsel and a special investigation and an obstruction of justice investigation that centers around him? I mean, didn't his own actions bring this upon himself?
Look, I think the actions of Director Comey, and certainly every day since his firing, we've seen more and more reason that he shouldn't have been the head of the FBI. It's turned out that he was leaking information. I think the president made the right decision, and for us to go back and try to recreate history is just simply not possible. Again, I think that it has been very clear time and time again, there's absolutely no collusion whatsoever with the president or this administration. We're ready to move on. I know the country is ready to move on, and we look forward to the special counsel wrapping this up so we can continue to focus on all of the great things we were doing. Imagine how many more good things for the country we would have been able to do this past year if everybody hadn't been so focused on this Russia.
That's true, but I got to go. But you have to say, I mean, the press focuses on it, but that's because the president's focused on it and tweeting about it. But we've got to leave it there. We'll see you tonight for the State of the Union. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, thank you for your time. And of course, NBC News is going to have live coverage of the president's State of the Union address. It's tonight, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific.
Hello, Today fans. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking that button down there and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives.